We've all heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. But the thing that we often forget is that it also takes one to support the mother.
Well, speaking of the village, this is our podcast. I'm Nicole Harlow.
And I'm Dawn Thompson. And we're here to connect you with a village of support you need from pregnancy to parenting.
So come on this journey with us as we build your village one episode at a time.
Hey there. Thanks for coming to the show today. We have got Caitlyn Schollmeier with us today, who is rock star. And I'm just going to have you tell us, introduce yourself, Caitlyn, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, Caitlyn Schollmeier. I am a nurse, a former birth doula, and I've had some training, graduate level training in midwifery. I've really been working in maternal health for the last 10 years in different capacities. I mean, at first it was a medic in the Air Force when I followed a midwife. I worked in OBGYN, and then I moved into labor and delivery. I became a nurse, worked in labor and delivery for a little while as a nurse, and then I worked as a birth doula actually after becoming a nurse. And then I went to midwifery school, and I've been in midwifery school for the last 2.5 years. And yeah, it's been great. I've also became a mom a few years ago as well, and now I'm a mom of 3. So
Nice.
A little bit about me.
Well, I always say that about doulas that we have the most unique view, and because we get to see birth in all areas in our community, right? Home birth, hospital birth, birth center birth, with different doctors, with different nurses. And you take that up a level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You take that
sure.
up a level because you've worked in the hospital, which that's something that we tend to lack, right? As a lot of doulas there are many nurses that have become doulas, but for those, I mean, I think that you're taking up a whole nother notch with then now going through midwifery school. So I really appreciate your perspective, and I think it'll make an interesting conversation today.
Yeah.
And I imagine that it's changed a lot too over the years, like mine has, right? The deeper you get into it, the more your vision and idea of the system changes a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's like with every step of this journey for me, it's like a new dimensions opened up and you see a new perspective. And I mean, it's really the whole last 10 years has really just further developed my approach, my philosophy. And I'm very thankful for that. I mean, and I look back and I think a lot of people give a lot of credit to my nursing background, which, is great. And I think they should, right? Because being a nurse is hard work and a lot of studying and all of that. But really, it was my time as a birth doula that was most transformative than anything else, even my midwifery training. I mean, it was my time as a doula, which a lot of people will look at that and they'll wrongly kind of look at that as being the lowest tier, and then you become a nurse. And you know what I mean? As if you just get promoted by, at those different levels. But that's not how I see things at all. Because it was as a doula that I saw, before the person comes into labor, the early parts of labor at home, and then the impacts of birth trauma and all sorts of things on the postpartum period too, that you just don't get to see as a nurse.
Right. Or a doctor, right?
Or a doctor, yeah.
It's half the doctors, they see their patients 6 weeks after they give birth. And then, they haven't seen those first few days of talking about being on Pitocin for hours and hours and what that fluid intake does to the body and how that impacts breastfeeding and the recovery and how having a C-section looks for a week later, and the physical element and the emotional element that's just entirely missing.
And, we hear about the medical gaslighting, right? People being kind of brushed off and treated like their symptoms aren't real. And that's where it comes from. It's really just a lack of perspective and also a lack of empathy. But I think that that's one of the things that, having all of these different perspectives has helped with for me, is being able to identify, all of those different experiences and how valid they are.
Yeah. Well, why don't you share with us a little bit about your motherhood journey so far?
Sure. Yeah. So me and my husband decided, a little over 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that we wanted to maybe start a family, probably after graduate school was the original plan. But I actually applied to midwifery programs at the time and I put all my eggs in one basket because I had worked so hard to get to that point. I mean, I literally spent my whole adult life just like prepping my application, and it was not enough to get into graduate school. So then I kind of had this whole year of time that I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this, until it was time to apply again. And so we decided, like, let's go ahead and give it a try. Let's try for a baby. And if we get pregnant in the first 3 months, then that's how it is. And if not, we're going to wait until after graduate school. And so we did that, and we got pregnant and found out it was twins, and ended up being this crazy roller coaster of a pregnancy. It was very high risk. And it was honestly a huge learning experience for me. It was actually at the same time that I competed in my pageants too. So I forgot to mention that in my bio, but back in 2020, again, I had this year that I didn't know what to do with. So I decided I'm going to pursue pageants, because as a teen, I competed and I never won anything. And so I was like, I'm going to use this year to go and see if I can win a state pageant. And I ended up going all the way through to, the end, and winning the national pageant title as the first woman to ever win a national pageant title pregnant, at the same time as let's try for a baby. And yeah, we got pregnant with our twins. And so it was a very exciting year for us, very transformative year for us. And so, yeah, we had our boys via C-section. Even though I tried super hard to avoid that, it was just not in the cards for us to have them any other way. And so then a few years later, when it was time to have our third baby, second pregnancy, a VBAC was my goal. And, like I said, that pregnancy, the first one, was really hard. And we had a lot of complications that came up. There were complications in the surgery. So it was really not very easily in the cards for me to go and have a VBAC, even less likely to be supported in that decision than the average person who wants a VBAC, which is already sort of challenging, to go and get a provider who's supportive of VBAC in general. But mine was even higher risk, a more complicated version. But I got a successful VBAC, and it was a very redemptive experience. So, I mean, I'm only 6 months out from that. And so I'm just still soaking in all of the good baby vibes, and, just a completely different pregnancy, completely different birth, and postpartum is so different than when you have little tiny twins that are NICU babies.
So now the only thing that you failed to mention in this motherhood journey is that you started a major business while on bed rest with your twins.
Yeah, that was another piece of it.
And then went and opened a brick and mortar version of your business while you were pregnant and giving birth to your third baby.
Yeah, that's true.
Come on.
Okay, yes.
You just made that sound like, hang on, I did this. I did that. It's like, oh yeah, let's add that next level stuff right now, because you're a boss, babe.
Thank you. Well, yeah. So, I mean, I won the pageant, pregnant with twins, and then on bed rest, I started my company because I had a TikTok video that went viral. And I mean, it was my, birth gown that I designed. It was something that I designed as a birth doula for, give my clients, my patients, privacy and comfort and all of that. And so, of course, I'm going to wear it for my own birth, and made a TikTok video, and it went viral. And so we started a company. And then I don't know, I think it's just something about the hormones, the pregnancy hormones, because when it was time for me to have my next baby, I was like, let's open an entire store and do all of the things. Like, we brought all of our fulfillment here to our store in Hendersonville and did a whole event. And so that's been really cool too. I just like to use my time wisely, I just like to boom.
Clearly. You don't nest. You take nesting to the next level. You take nesting to the next level, lady. So, I mean, I love it. Obviously, that's how you and I met. Yeah. And developed a friendship. And I, of course, am so passionate about VBAC. I think that might have been one of the first things I reached out to you about, was let's chat. Let me just give you my whatever, anything I could give. I just wanted to support you in having that success. And, and obviously having such a platform in the way that you do, it's such a responsibility, right? And to just be able to share your story online for other women to inspire them, I think is huge. And I mean, you're right up there with 1 million followers now on TikTok, right?
Yeah, about.
Yeah, close to that number. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty good.
I mean, we started after that first viral video, it was 160 So it's been steadily growing since, starting my company. And it's been for all sorts of different reasons. I mean, yeah, the pageant stuff and the company stuff and the mom content and all the
Yeah. And I'll just, what was that?
No, go ahead, Dawn.
I was just gonna say I'll do a plug for the business because obviously I got to be in person with those gowns because coming to your opening event, they're stunning. And I mean, I don't even think that they come across on video as beautiful and comfortable and soft as they are. And I also really love the fact that many women wear them well beyond that initial labor, like as a labor gown. It's something you wear around the house.
I still wear mine today. I've been wearing them every day, almost every day since I made them.
Yeah. And Nicole, as a nursing mom, she has some amazing clothes. It's not, now she's gone well beyond just that labor. I bought one of the dresses myself. And I think I mentioned it when we did our pre-interview, but, and nobody would know that it has these, zippers on the side so I could breastfeed. It just looks cute. So anyways, I'm a big supporter. I'm a big fan, Caitlyn, and I love what you've done. And I love women who just get shit done. Excuse my language, but I just do. And because I'm one of those people.
I know. So I was going to say it's because you are one.
I can see that in other people. And there's so many of us. And like, man, if we can all come together and just start pulling together, that's really what this podcast is about, right? It's about giving women the support and love that they need to be successful. And so, I'm always here to back you up. Anyways, well, tell us, like, what do you think? What was the thing in your life, though, that really inspired this career path that you're on?
I mean, it was definitely a person more than a thing. I was, 18, fresh out of high school, joined the military because I didn't really know exactly what it is I wanted to do with my life. And I thought, okay, I don't like to waste time, like I said. So I'm like, I want to do something where I can help people and also figure myself out and figure out what I want to do. And I became a medic because I was like, there's got to be something in the hospital. There's got to be something in the medical field that I could do. It's helping people. I wanted to help people. So I'm like, there's got to be something. Well, then I realized pretty early on that I didn't like working in the hospital. I hated the medical field in general. Through my rotations, it was just a lot of sad cases and a lot of really cold, distant providers because, it's hard to get close to your patients without kind of growing cynical. And, and so I was like, maybe I don't belong here. And then I was placed in an OBGYN clinic with a midwife who's, to this day, after working with many, many providers and midwives, wonderful ones, is still number one. Like she had the most amazing bedside manner. She was so knowledgeable, so ambitious. She wanted to learn everything that she could as a midwife. She wanted to be there helping with the C-sections and doing the, vacuum assists, but also incredibly holistic and incredibly just kind and compassionate. And at the time, having just graduated high school, my high school boyfriend, he always told me I was a closeted feminist.
Yeah.
Which I realize now, I didn't know what that meant. That kind of puzzled me when he first told me that. And then I realized, I'm like, actually, he clocked me before I even clocked me. I didn't know who I was at that time, but that's exactly what that was. I was just very passionate about, supporting women and their voices and all of that. And I also have always been fascinated by pregnancy. And then I just see this person doing this job that encompassed everything that I thought was the coolest thing in the world and was light bulb went off.
Yeah.
And so I decided then and there, 18 years old, I'm going to be a midwife. And now I am 29 and I'm almost there. It only took me 10 years.
Well, and 3 babies,
yeah.
real. And you had your babies early, right? The twins came fairly early.
Yeah. I mean, gestationally. Yeah. 34 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's a whole element, another secondary element to add to the postpartum journey anyways, but having them a little bit on the premature side doesn't, just adds a little extra fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I look at my pregnancies. I had this one that was super easy that I just had this baby recently and there was no surprises. And then I had this other pregnancy that brought me to my knees. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think honestly, it feels a little bit ironic because God's way of humbling me or something because, I was this doula that helped all my clients get through the hardest parts of their pregnancies and advocate for themselves. And, you know, I had this like wealth of knowledge that I could not use at all because my pregnancy was so complicated that I did not know what was going on at any point.
You're
But
just like, yeah.
yeah, but you know, it was actually really valuable because it gave me the same sense of like fear and just trying to navigate something that you didn't understand that I think a lot of my clients and patients deal with, right? Just in a different way. Because yeah, I didn't know what vasoprevia was. That was one of the complications I had. I had never heard of that before. There weren't a whole lot of complications that I had never heard of before, but
Right.
there they were.
There it was.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it happens, right? Yeah. It happens
Yeah.
that you think you got it and you don't.
Yeah.
You know, you think you got it all and then you have so much more to learn.
So speaking of your pregnancies, Caitlyn, how do you think the different lenses that you've been able to look through as a nurse, as the birth doula, as the studying midwife, has really supported you in motherhood now as a mother of 3?
Yeah. I'd say that it's taught me quite a bit, and then being a mom has also helped me understand those roles as well a lot better. I do think that like working around birth all the time and getting that exposure has, I mean, I don't fear birth. I mean, going into my last baby, you know, it was like an interesting experience because it was very painful. You know, I got to about 10 centimeters before getting the epidural, and so I, you know, got to kind of experience all of that, but there was just like no anxiety with it. And it ended up making the experience just like, I mean, it was just so hard, but easy. Like, it was like, I couldn't say that it was easy because it was painful and challenging, but it was like not anything like what I would have imagined because I just wasn't afraid of it. So I think that's played a role in kind of my journey to motherhood. I also feel like because I've seen all these different perspectives that I've seen a lot of different opinions. I've seen a lot of different ways that parents approach parenting. And I also have a little bit of a background in human development as well. That was what my bachelor's degree was in. And so I feel a less of a need for judgment. I think like I don't judge other people's choices as long as I feel like they've been well educated with accurate information and that it was their choice. Because if people aren't well educated, how can you say that that's their choice, right? It was whoever choice gave that inaccurate information or didn't give the complete picture, right? But
Right.
you know, at that point, it's in that person's hands. And I've learned to trust parents and trust other people to make those choices for themselves. And so therefore I give myself the same grace. And I don't hold myself to this point where I've got to be some sort of perfect parent, you know, and do things in one particular way. I think those are probably the two things that have made the biggest impact.
I think that's so important to just point out. And I know sometimes when we're answering, like, we don't even realize the gold that comes out, but not striving to be that perfect parent for a lot of, I'd say, first-time moms who are trying to get all the information and try to make all the right decisions. And what is right for one person is not right for another. So what you know, circling back to what you said in the beginning of educated, informed decisions are so important. And as a mom of 4, they were different for every single baby. And like, just like you said, you had 2 very different pregnancies, and the decisions that you had to make for both of them were the best ones at that time, you know, hopefully. And it's full circle. So for any listeners who are first-time moms or expecting their first, know that whatever feels right, like, lean into your intuition. I think that's really important to say because I think our society has taught us not to listen to our intuition, but especially in pregnancy and postpartum, like, that is our biggest driving factor.
Yeah.
And that's what drives then the education and the informed decision making.
Right.
Yeah.
I have 6, and I had a big gap between my first 4 and my next 2. I'm a completely different parent with my 2 youngest kids. I mean, I use this as an example because I think you know, some will get here, but I'm a Virgo. I'm very by the book, right? Like, you know, and I was militant. It's to some cases, especially with like my kids' bedtime when they were in elementary school. And by that time, I was a single mom and had 2 kids, and I was militant about it. I didn't even get off work until 5:30. I picked them up from their school, after school care. We were running home, trying to feed them, trying to do homework, get them bathed, and get them to bed all by 8:00. That's impossible, by the way. Almost impossible. But what was happening was I was so obsessed with that, like 8:00, like they had to be in bed by 8:00, that I was just like, we're done. I was yelling. I was, like I was doing all of these things because I thought the best thing for them was to be in bed and get the needed sleep that they needed. And it turns out that really, and they were impossible to go to bed because they were still wound up. They were all these things. And it wound up just being this battle all the time. And if I would have they just wanted time with me.
Yeah.
Right. And if I would have taken 5 more minutes or 15 minutes, like, so what if they didn't get to bed till 8:15 or 8:30 even? But I just didn't have that lens. I just didn't have the ability to see through that. And
Really,
I regret it so much.
I think a lot of that like experience brings different colors and different dimensions to your perspective. And like when you're a brand new parent and it's all new, things are in shades of black and white. And the more time and experience you spend in anything, you add color and you add dimension to it. And then you land somewhere in the middle. I think so many people are sold like one right way to do something, one right way to feed your baby, one right way. And it applies the same way too from the medical side of things. One right way to induce labor, one right way to,
Manage
whatever.
pregnancy. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the more you spend in the thick of it and really feeling out all of those different options and listening to people, you find that there is no right or right. It's like it's all just
is.
Yeah,
right.
It all just is. And
I think that's the problem with Google and Google searching.
Yeah.
It's like you're gonna ask that question, or even mommy groups, right? You're going to ask that question and be overwhelmed with answers because there is no one right way to do any of this.
Yeah.
And like, the only thing that you could do, and then you try too many different things and wind up a mess because
well, that's where a lot of the judgment comes from too, right? Because like people buy into this is the only way for your baby to sleep. No sleep training, no fervor, whatever,
Right.
And then you make different choices because based on different information and whatever else, or based on different advice, different opinions that you're hearing, and then you feel guilty because you made a different choice, and it's and someone else is telling you that's the worst thing in the world. And so I do think
how dare you, right?
Yeah, you just with enough
abusing
experience,
your child,
you land somewhere in the middle, you know?
Well, and every, like, Nicole, you pointed to it. It's like every kid is different too. Like every temperament is different and what they need is different. Or how many kids do you have? Let me tell you, my last 2 were 13 months apart. That's insane. I have a 1-year-old who literally does not understand that I'm sorry, honey, but I have to stop for a minute and feed your brother. Like she didn't get that. Like that was just like not in her world. She was in her own world at that point. And like, so guess what? My newborn lived in the baby carrier. He took his naps in there. I just strapped him on in the morning and took him off at night with a few put downs in the middle. And you know how many people would be judgmental of that? Of like, oh, well, you got to put him down. You're spoiling him,
And
like
my inner dialogue right now was like, wow, that baby was so lucky to be attached to you all day, every day. Right? Like, so it's all about the lens that you're looking through.
Exactly.
Yeah. And guess what? He's 14 and he's amazing. And guess what? He's not attached to the boob. Like, at 14, like, you know what I mean? I nursed him until he's 3.5 and he's the biggest, strongest, healthiest, most balanced kid of our entire family. So, but everybody back then was judgmental of that decision.
I I teach this childbirth course, and one of the parts of it is where we work on birth planning and all the different options you have. And one marker of success, I feel like, at the end of that is not if everyone's birth plan looks exactly the same. I want their birth plans to all look very different, more different, the better almost, because that tells me that I presented them with both sides as unbiased as I possibly could have,
Oh, I
because they're
love
all
that.
different. And so if I'm presenting things without a huge skew to them, then I would expect their choices to be all different too.
Yeah. I've had to really work hard at that, to be honest with you.
I mean, we all do. It's hard.
Yeah. It's hard to work through your own bias and what you think is best. But there's a humility that comes with experience too, to understand that, like, yes, you absolutely made the right choice to schedule your cesarean, like, whatever it is that was best for you, even though I'm like, oh my God, why, but I've had to work through that. And it's been hard. I was super judgmental in the beginning of my doula career, and judgmental of doctors, of nurses, of people, like, but recognizing that was also my own trauma that was leaking out and spilling out onto other people. And
Yeah.
so, it's taken me time to work through that thing.
Journey.
So, Caitlyn, I want to give you this opportunity to plug the store and all your gowns, and where people can find you online and all that stuff.
Sure. Well, everyone knows us for our birth gowns, right? We have our whole line of labor wear. I like to call it labor wear. Just accessible hospital clothing, but it's not hospital clothing. It's a soft, comfortable gown. Patients, people who are giving birth don't get the privacy that they deserve, that they're really entitled to. It's something that they teach us as a nurse, that every patient is entitled to privacy, reasonably, right? And yes, you're going to give birth and people are going to see things, but you don't have to feel vulnerable and uncomfortable during that process. There are studies that show that feeling confident, that not having to wear a gown that is revealing is actually been shown to what? Sorry. Wait, let me start over. Okay. Where was I? Let me think.
Sorry.
No,
My
you're
fault.
fine. You're fine. How did I start this?
You said that not even wearing there are studies that show that wearing a gown that's revealing.
Yeah, so they've surveyed people and they've done studies on people wearing hospital gowns that are revealing, and people report having worse experiences, remembering their birth experience quite differently, and feeling very vulnerable. And that's not what we want for people's experience. We want them to remember it as positively as possible. So 4 different styles of birth gown for all different types of people. We have a modest version, we have plus sizes. They're all made of stain resistant material. They're soft, comfortable, and provide all that coverage. And, we're also kind of expanding into maternity wear, postpartum wear, supplies, and even down the line, education out there to the masses when we'll do our, virtual things and whatnot. So really just trying to create a place where people can kind of access different resources in one place, which I know is needed.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And coming from someone who birthed naked, I think all 4 times, because I didn't want a hospital gown and I was home for the last 2. So that made it easier. Those still sound really, really appealing to me. If I, by any chance, have another baby, maybe I'll check them out. So last question, speaking of the village, Caitlyn, besides your role, which I know you wear many hats, but let's just say your current role as a potential student midwife, who would you say is the most important role in the village for moms listening?
I think doulas are. I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that because I was a doula, but
You are.
I mean, yeah, I think the doulas are. I think they make a huge, huge impact, and they're also so overlooked as well.
Amazing. Dawn, you're muted.
anyways, I mean, I think you're totally right. And it's, it's ever changing. I think that it's improving all the time. I mean, obviously when I started 21 years ago or 22 years ago, most people didn't even know what a doula was. When I said I was a doula, people would be a what? A what? And now I don't have to explain it anymore. And I know that number is going up rapidly, but it's still the biggest challenge we have is that people don't understand what a massive impact that doulas make. And, when we did our beta test for the virtual support system, I really didn't think, that our results would be as good as they were, and obviously it's a small set, but I mean, we had only one C-section out of 20 in the first 20 people.
Yeah, that's amazing.
One. And that, compared to the national average.
Yeah.
Right. And we only had like 5% induction rate. Again, compared to what 70% is being induced and labor sped up now. And like, I'm sure that number is even more so now after the ARRIVE trial. But, I was blown away, and that's virtual support. That's not even in-person support. Like it just shows what the impact is of that information and the way it can be delivered.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, when I was in San Francisco and COVID was striking, and I was a birth doula, and I was really skeptical about virtually supporting people. I was like, I mean, I wanted to just give them all refunds and be like, never mind, you know what I mean? But instead, we worked through the Zoom and through the camera, and it was, I had just as good of success in terms of people feeling empowered to reach their goals and talk to their providers and all of that virtually as I did in person.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where I realized I was like, so much of this is psychological, so much of this is information, education inspired, and
I always say that, like, that's the thing. It's like doula work is really 80% educational, informational. Yeah. And then that last 20, even though it's where we spend most of our time, is the actual labor room.
Yeah.
Right. But really the biggest impact of what we do is educational, informational. Rubbing your back just isn't going to make that big of a difference, especially because if we're on video chat, I can tell your husband, or I can tell your husband ahead of the time, like, these are the things to do. Right. Yeah. Like, these are the ways you can squeeze her hips, those are.
And people don't buy into it, because they think education, what do I need that for? Like, it's not medications. It's not, like treatment. It's not all those things. But that's the thing, is that we're not getting that from our providers. We're not getting it from our nurses. Like, they don't have time. It's not that they don't want to do it. It's just, they don't have time. The system's not set up for them to be able to do that.
That's right.
So unfortunately, we need to pay to fill in that gap, and maybe one day doulas will just be covered by all insurances.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's like a whole nother discussion that, of course, I could just leap off into the deep end on, but, we're at the end of our time. Yep. And, I really, really appreciate you coming on, Caitlyn, and being one of our first guests. It's been an exciting process for us, and I'm so grateful that you are willing to share your time with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Speaking of the Village. If you love today's episode, make sure to hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
And remember, you're not alone. We're here, we're listening, and we're all in this together, because in our village, no mom walks alone.